Recording in progress.
Good evening, everyone. So tonight for Spotlight Tuesday, we have the inspiring and courageous Janie Walker. And Janie is a bibliotherapist, and she helps people through creative art and writing, and she helps them through trauma and many other difficulties. And Janie is going to be sharing a bit about her story, how she got into different types of healing work, and her spiritual journey. So Janie, I'd love you to just share with the group a little bit about you, how you get into this work, and even a bit about your spiritual journey, because I know that you have faced a lot of battles. You've been a recovering alcoholic 27 years.
Yep.
And you're a survivor of child abuse. You know, when you're a child, you had all sorts of abuse. So I would love to hear a wee bit more about your story and what brought you to here.
Okay, well, thanks very much for inviting me along. It's a pleasure to be part of this group and your interview tonight. So thank you for doing that. I've had a very interesting journey, to say the least, I suppose. It's almost like I've had different lives within this one life that I've had. And I guess for me, it probably started to change big time when I got sober. So I decided one night when there was a few bottles lying on the floor, empty, and my two kids were up the stairs in bed. And I had this thought that if anything was wrong, although I wasn't drunk at that point, if anything went wrong, I would go to bed and I would be in what we call a blackout in my circles, because that means basically that you go to sleep, but you're not really sleeping, you're actually blacked out. And that's why a lot of people end up in prison and stuff like that, or they wake up in the morning, they're covered in blood and they don't know what's happened, because it's actually that you're actually performing, you're actually just going on like on a daily basis, you're doing something. It could be that you go out to the shops and you meet somebody or whatever, and you maybe been drinking at the time, and then what happens is that you come back and then you meet that person and they say, oh, it was nice to see you at the shops yesterday, and you're like, you don't remember meeting anybody, so you're actually out and about doing stuff. So that's what's known as a blackout. So I realized that, you know, if I went to bed at that point, that, you know, I would go into a blackout, but that wasn't really the reason for me stopping. The reason was that I kind of realized that, I kind of mouthed off when I had been drinking a little bit, and something had happened with one of my husband at that time, with somebody that worked for him. So I thought, well, if anything happened and he lost his job, we wouldn't have any money to drink. So that's the logic, and I hope you can sort of understand that. The logic is just
of the addict.
And it was more about not having any money to drink. And here was me making a decision to stop drinking, rather than even the kids being up the stairs, you know. So it was probably a wee combination of both, I would say. So I phoned the organisation that takes care of people like me, and a woman phoned me back, and that was the start of my journey. Now, it wasn't the first time that I had tried to stop, so I had stopped when I was about 26, but I was forced to stop. So I had accidentally, and it was an accident, although I had a few drinks, I wasn't drunk or anything, but I'd accidentally dropped a loft door onto my mother's face, who was standing below, and it was an accident. because it was on a lip, and you know, had to turn it. I was on ladders that didn't reach the top and all that carry on. So it was an accident. But anyway, I dropped this down in my mother's face, and years later, only about 3 years ago, I said to my cousin, how come I never saw my mother's face black and blue? Because she didn't come to visit me in hospital. And she said, because that was the day that you went into hospital. And I said, oh, so here's me only finding out at whatever age I was then, 60, 64 or something like that, that was the reason why my mother never came to visit me in that hospital. So it was a psychiatric hospital rehab. And I tried to get sober, but I just ended up saying to them, that was really nice. That meeting was really nice for you guys, but not for me. That was after sitting, bawling and crying all the way through it and disturbing everybody else, of course, because that's what you do. It's very selfish illness, and you have no thought for anybody else except yourself. So that's where you live your life, and also where the next drink's coming from, where you're going to get money for the next drink. So that's the life of an addict: selfish, self-centered to the core. And people would have said I was quite a nice person, but that's the way that it is for you. So I had tried to stop before. On that occasion, I got 3 months just doing crazy stuff, like, you know, painting the house and stuff like that to keep myself. I actually cut up a 3-piece suite into 1-inch squares. And can you imagine the mess in that living room? I was living on my own at that point. I cut up this thing with a razor blade, and it was like that spongy ball stuff, not sponge, but stuff. And with what I cut up, I made a beanbag to replace this 3-piece suite. So that's what I did every night with this razor blade, sat and cut them up. And then my mother went and bought me a cat to try and keep me company. And within 2 days, the cat peed in the beanbag. So that was the end of that. It's just crazy. You're mentally unbalanced.
Yes, of course. So,
and it's just like another person. It's just another life, you know, that life that I was leading at that point, you know. So I got 3 months, and then somebody that I had lived with just before I moved into this place, he had knocked out my 3 front teeth with 1 punch, and he was a black belt karate. And there was no reason for it. He just turned me around, and then he left, and then he got down on his knees. So one of the things that I've learned is that I'm always protecting the person that's doing the bad stuff, you know. So he got down on his knees and held on to me, and he was saying, I'm sorry. And I'm looking down, he's blonde hair, and I'm saying his hair's turning red. And I wonder where my teeth are, you know. So my face at that point was black and blue for about 8 weeks. And so he went and bought me a bottle of vodka and brought it back, and then disappeared for about 12 weeks. And I never saw him. And I was in that house on my own. So, and I was very nice looking. I was about a size 8 at that point, 8 to 10.
Yeah.
But my thought was, well, you better not tell anybody, because they'll just tell you to leave him, and then you can't leave him because he's the only person that will have you, because you're an alcoholic. So that was my thought. So that low self-esteem has gone through my whole life, actually, my whole life. Like I would never go into a pub and have a drink on my own, never, because my self-esteem wouldn't allow that. No, I just didn't have the confidence to do that. So that's why my workshops are my email address, whatever they're called, is confidence building workshops, because that's what I've suffered from my whole life. So I'm an expert on that. I know I'm an expert on that. So So that was the first real kind of violence in my life, and after that, I finally got away from him, maybe about a year later or something like that, and I moved into a wee flat, and a very good family lawyer, they call them, helped me, a woman. She helped me to do that, and that was good. So if you're in that situation, and these family lawyers are very good, because that's what they do for a living. So within 3 months, he was championing my door again there, and then introduced me to something other than alcohol. And from that day onwards, I became addicted to hash. Something stronger he gave me, but I don't know what it was. So, and then I let him back in to the new flat. I let him back in there. And what happened was, I met this guy at work. He was an outside worker and the contractor. He was putting stuff in, and I met him. And he used to bring me blackened rolls from Blacks in Clydebank. And
is that when it's like crisp at the top? Is that what it...
kind of like, they were blackened, they were kind of like almost burned, right? But they were quite soft. But he used to get it buttered on both sides, and it'd have roast pork in it, right? And he used to pull the fat off the roast pork for me, and then give me these 2 rolls when he came in the morning. So I just thought, anybody who would take the fat off your roast pork for you must be worth going out with, you know. So this other one, he's still in the background, he's still disappearing and stuff like that, you know, and taking drugs. And I didn't even know that he took drugs. So I come home from work early one day, and this nude figure was running up and down my hall as if he was on hot coals. So God knows what he was on, but he had obviously been doing that for a long time, and I didn't know. I didn't know. How crazy is that? It's just crazy, because you're in that addiction cycle yourself, so you can't really see it in other people, you know. So ended up going out with this other guy, and just sitting looking at him in the car, and he was late. He turned up late. He was half pissed. He was homeless, and he'd just come back from Saudi Arabia or someplace. He was homeless, and he was half pissed meeting me for a first date. So, and I wasn't drinking at that point. So,
okay,
interesting. So I then just thought, well, you know, he's got nice hands. So he's got nice hands, and he's got a nice way about him, because he had this nice way about him, you know. So we'll just forget the fact that he turned up late and pissed for the first date, you know. So ended up putting that guy out in the morning and bringing this homeless alcoholic in the afternoon. So that's what, and that's me not drinking. That's me not drinking. So I had experienced this life of madness. It's called alcoholism, and it's called alcoholism because it's not really about the alcohol, it's about your state of mind, and it's about what happens, and it's also about what happens with the people round about you. So it's like an illness. It's a mental illness. So if you don't change your mind, nothing changes. You can stop drinking, and that will certainly help the craving, the craving of the, because if you're not putting one drink in, you're not demanding another and another, because that's what alcoholism is, or addiction is, you know. You take one, you want another, you want another. So I ended up marrying him because I thought that was all I was worth, really, you know. And right, even from the beginning, he was like coming in drunk and talking about being at the dancing and with these girls and all that. And I just, it's like you've got this button that says, just ignore that. That's a good way of putting that. Just ignore that. And I think also you're just ignoring everything else that's going on round about you as well. And I decided to make this life and marry this guy. And people liked him, you know, people liked him because he was a nice guy. And he was a nice guy. And so I was with him for 5 years, and then I started drinking again. He didn't like me smoking and stuff, and then and neither did I anyway. So I just started drinking, and started very quietly and very slowly. And then of course it just, you know, it just started to creep up again. But because I had stopped drinking for quite a long time when I was married to him as well, it must have given my body a bit of a rest, because what happened was that after 5 years, I fell pregnant, and I was told with that other guy who had children that I couldn't have any children, and my tubes were blocked, and I would never ever have children. So my mother and I had a really loving relationship, except you know, we would fall out because she would maybe mention something about children or something else. About I can never have children. I would say it quite horribly to her, you know. And here I was 5 years on, and I was pregnant. So he wasn't very happy, I can assure you, because he had 2 kids of his own. So I thought my life was to be with him and these 2 kids at the weekend, whatever. And I just believed everything he told me about his previous marriage, everything. Even though there was proof coming in to the contrary, I chose to ignore it. So you'll probably hear these words quite a few times. I chose to ignore it. So in that chaos, in that life, in order to get here, it's funny because last night we were kind of talking about, you know, how you get here and how you choose your parents, and you choose where you're going to live and what country you're going to live in and all that before you come, you know, and then we come here, and then we have to live the life, you know. And my mother was told never to have any children, so any more children. So she had my sister, and then I don't know what happened with that birth. I'm not quite sure. But then I only learned 5 years ago now, that talking to my cousin, and then I was saying, why do you think my mother was so depressed? And she said, okay, it was probably about that baby, that deformed baby that she had, and they just came and whipped it away and just threw it in an incinerator. And I didn't know anything about it. So I didn't know my mother had this baby that was deformed, as they called it, you know. So I'd actually had a brother or a sister. I think it was a boy. Nobody spoke about it. It was never discussed. And then, so after my brother came, then it was 5 years later, and she fell pregnant with me. So I wasn't wanted by anybody except my mother.
Right.
Because they thought she was going to die, because that was, you know, she was a haemophilia.
Right.
So they thought she was going to die, especially my father, and he wasn't long back from the war and stuff like that. So nobody wanted me, really. So it probably started inside the womb for me, you know.
Of course. I mean, and that's, you can imagine the trauma perhaps your mum was carrying through that, and all these mixed emotions from other people, not just from herself, which she was carrying, and what was coming through. And as you say, that area, there was a lot of sort of, I suppose we would look at it now as strange views and things as well.
Absolutely. So so
uneducated views.
Exactly. And then the problem was that she did have me, and she was okay. but then she was clinically depressed. So they came and said to her, if you don't pull yourself together, because that's what they used to say to them,
Oh,
if you don't pull yourself together, we're going to take her away from you. So can you imagine, you know, imagine what my poor mother had to do to show them that she was capable when she was anything but capable. And so that's what I came into. And I came into a clinically depressed mother, you know, and my father who worked all sorts of different hours because she made him, because she wanted nicer things in life and she wanted to get out of the place where we lived. So she was also religious in the Brethren, and but she wasn't dead strict, but it was expected that she should be. So we were brought up in that, but I seem to be the only one that was affected by that for some reason. I don't know.
You've frozen a bit, Jane.
My sister, and I don't even know who. All right, I've not done anything. Is it still frozen?
Oh no, it's fine. No, no, sometimes it's just the connection continuing. No, you're fine.
So my sister must have brought me up because she was 10 at that point. So she must have brought me up, you know, to help my mother, because my mother wasn't capable. And then they came and gave my mother ECT. Is that the right thing?
Oh no, the electric. I know that. Oh, I had an older aunt. Oh, it's terrible what it does to people.
Over again, we
Such horrific therapy. I mean, is it electroconvulsion therapy? Was that what it was?
Absolutely brutal, to be honest. But anyway, of course, I didn't know anything about it, but until later as well. So family full of secrets, big time. And then when I was about 5, we lived in a house in Scheme in Glasgow, and this guy offered me a cigarette. I was 5, and he offered me a cigarette, and of course I just took the cigarette. It was 2 or 3 of them hanging about, you know, and it nearly choked to death, of course, you know. And then he abused me on the stair and sent me up to the landing to a guy that was on the landing for the same thing, and then sent me back down. So blah blah blah, but I didn't know anything about that. So we left there and we went to Knightswood. So the only reason that I found out about any of this was when I turned 40. So when we left that house and estate, we went to a nicer place in Glasgow, and everybody was all chuffed because we'd got this house, still a council house, but we're all chuffed, you know. But my sister had bronchitis, so for some reason they put her in a room of her own, and my brother had a room at the end, and my mother and father were in a room, and of course I was in the middle of the bed. My mother's on phenobarbital at that point, plus sleeping pills, what have you. So use your imagination. And the next day when I got up and the 2 of them were standing there, I told them what had happened in that bed, and they both said that didn't happen. And so that was the start of not being believed for me. Not being believed, you know. So I didn't know anything about that because I buried that, and I buried what happened, you know, with the 2 guys as well. I buried that well and truly. Didn't know. I was a wee quiet girl. My mother used to dress me, and my granny used to knit these suits, cardigans, and a skirt. Can you imagine? Send me to secondary school and these things, you know, and they used to come and pull the elasticated skirt down, and you're standing in your navy blue knickers. Just absolutely horrific. And then these girls came one day and they said, we're going to get you at 4 o'clock. I didn't know what they were getting me for, because I was just a wee quiet thing, you know. And so probably for the first time I used my, maybe it was intuition, and I ran home at dinner time and I stole 2 or 3 single shillings out of the wee glass dish in the meter. And I went back, and there was a wee shop, a wee Asian shop, where you could buy anything, one of them, at the school. And I went in and bought 5 Capstan, which for those of you that don't know, is
I
cigarettes.
don't know what that is.
Cigarettes without a filter, right? 5
Right, okay.
Capstan. That's what they were called. And I took them back to school. And I don't know how I ever did this, but I walked to the sheds where all these toughies were standing, these ones that were going to get me at 4 o'clock. And I just brought out a cigarette. I must have been shaking like a leaf. I was
Oh.
about 13 or 14, 13, I think.
Mhm.
And I put this cigarette in and then I was trying to light it. And they went, we didn't know you smoked and all that stuff, right? And I was absolutely petrified out my face. And I says, I do. And I was trying to act tough, you know. And then I said, do you want one? And they all took one. They all took one and they lit them up. Of course, you know, no bother. And I, you know, I dropped mine and then I just walked away. They never got me at 4 o'clock. They never came after me because I had done that. And then when I got home, my friend had gone to my mother's house before me at 4 o'clock and told my mother that I stole those single shillings. And my mother brought me in, pulled down that bloody knitted skirt and pulled down my navy blue knickers and thrashed me. I mean, thrashed me on the bare backside. So it was more about the humiliation than the actual beating that I got, you know, and that was for stealing. And that was my pal that told her. How awful. Anyway, I suppose from that incident that I realized that, you know, I could have power. I could, you know, I could maybe sort situations because nobody else was going to do it for me, because I couldn't tell MD that when I went to school, when we moved to the new place, that a teacher was hitting me and bullying me and saying that I was a stupid idiot because I lived in this house in this state and that I was hopeless and useless and I never get any of the sweeties that she used to give out of this big tin that I'm always talking about, midget gems. And she gave them to everybody else except me, or no. And she absolutely destroyed me, that woman. And she used to hit me as well. So I'd nobody to tell, because how could I go home and tell these 2 people that I'd told about this horrific thing and they had went, no, that didn't happen. So there was nobody believing me anymore. So I was on my own from a very young age.
And it's a survival thing, Janie, you know, it's one of the things is we all as children do whatever it is, we have to find there's a pattern. And at the time it's that way, it's this, it might be not the healthiest way, but it's sometimes the only way we think that we can survive. And you obviously that's what you were trying to do, was survive.
Exactly, yes, survive. And so I left school when I was 15. I hated school. I used to sit and stare out the window at the clouds and couldn't take anything in. I know now that I've probably got ADD, but then that wasn't even a word, that wasn't even heard of. And Wayne's running, going to the school and running about mad. I didn't have that. I didn't have ADHD. I didn't have that running about stuff. But I couldn't concentrate. I can't do numbers, stuff like that. And so now if I go somewhere, I just say, I can't do numbers, so just work it out for me if you don't mind. Do you mind doing that? And then they go, no, that's fine. They'll do it for you. It's quite interesting. See, when you put your hand up and go, I can't do that. People will help you, you know. So I started drinking when I was 17, when my father died in my arms. And I went into the bedroom and he was having a heart attack, actually. And he'd had a few before that, so it wasn't the first. And I ran over, but I didn't know what to do. So I was 17. And then this man who had withdrawn his love after that from me, by the way. So I would run and jump up on his knee because, remember, I've, you know, put that stuff away. And here he was now lying in my arms, heart to heart, and dying. And sometimes I wonder if the sorrow of what had happened and the sorrow of losing me and losing that love actually come onto me at that point, because his heart was right next to my heart, and I had my arms around him, begging him not to go, but you know, and they had to force me out of that room so that they could see to him, you know. So from that day on, I started drinking, and that was when the drinking to block out that pain. So, and no doubt I was blocking out other pain, but I didn't know about it. So basically I drank from then till I was 25 when I went into the rehab, because I'd been taken in with pancreatitis before that, and I was nearly dead. And it was my mother that actually came and saved my life. She came and got me out of that flat. It's terrible. And then into that hospital, came out, not drinking, but my mindset was still in addictions, you know. So basically
No, it's quite important for maybe people maybe don't understand addiction, Janie. Just the point you've made there is that, you know, some people just think the fact that someone can come off that if they don't use the thing that's causing them the addiction, that they're well, where there's so much more to it than that. So a lot of people maybe don't understand that. So you've highlighted a really important thing there.
Yeah, it is very important, and that's why when I turned 40, and then I thought I'm stopping drinking now, and I phoned for help. I consider myself to be very lucky, because when you go into these organizations, you might go in and maybe get somebody that's not very helpful to you, or you might get people try to control you. You might get people try to do other things to you. I was really fortunate. I got a woman who had sponsored, you know, quite a lot of people. She was 10 years sober. She belonged to a 12-step group. She did the 12 steps all the time, helping people. So right away, she put me on this program. So right away, my mind is being altered. Right away, my mind's been changed from that alcoholic mind, from that craziness that I've just told you about. My mind's been changed. First step, you know, admit that you're alcoholic and your life has become unmanageable. And right away you're going, my life's not unmanageable. You're actually saying my life's not unmanageable. What are they talking about? And your life is crazy, but you don't realize it, you know. And
you normalize it, you know.
It's normalizing it, and you're doing that. Well,
denial.
I'll just ignore that for the moment, you know. So, you know, without going through all the steps, you know, there's 12 steps to go through. I did that, and I did it with the very best of intentions, because I knew that I could stop drinking, but I couldn't stop drinking. Right? I knew that because I'd experienced it when I was 25. So I started doing the steps with this woman, and then I started going to tons of meetings, about 5 meetings a week, right? But all the meetings that I went to were recovery meetings. So that meant I was hearing about recovery all the time, and no have to sit and listen to drunkalogs all the time, right? So I was dead lucky, really lucky, honestly. So once I did that 12-step program, I'm changing all the time, but something else has happened. I've stopped drinking. My husband's still drinking. So he tells me, I've lost my drinking partner. No. So drinking partner, well, actually, what would happen is he'd buy me a half bottle to shut me up on a Friday night. He'd go to the pub, and then he wouldn't come back, and then he'd come in absolutely steaming and in trouble. So that's what happened. So I was choosing to ignore that as well. So now I'm not drinking, so all his faults are showing up, right? And then I'm becoming a smart aleck as well, because I'm not drinking, so I'm kind of putting the focus on him, which is what you do. So I'm just being honest here, because that's what you do. And the main thing about doing a 12-step program, because there's 12-step programs for everything that you can possibly imagine. But the main thing was that I was doing the work on myself.
No, that's the most important thing, isn't it?
When you get to step 4, that's about, they call it character defects. And I went to her and I said, what does it have to do here? And she said, just to write down all your resentments, your anger, your fear, your sexual conduct, right? And I said, well, I've not got any resentments. And she just smiled. And she's brilliant. She's dead now. She went, is that right? That's good. You've not got any resentments. Yes, that's that's fine. She says, I just try and write one, even just try and write one and see what happens. Just see what happens. I said, all right. So ended up in my step 4, I had 375 resentments. Wow. And then what you do is after you write all these, you write down your fear and stuff. And then at the end of the column, you write, what's your part in it? And all down mine was SE, self-seeking, SS for self-seeking, S for selfishness, and then a few fears, right? But mainly it was self-seeking and selfishness that were my biggest character defects that I didn't know about. So you share all that with her, you know, and then you go on and you experience this selfishness and self-centeredness and these other steps. So and then the last step is about, you know, improving your conscious contact with God as you understand God, is how it's put, right? And helping other people to recover from alcoholism. That's the 12th step. So I then went on a search for the God that I didn't really want. And I used to say to people, I don't pray. And every day I'd be saying the serenity prayer, right? God grant me the serenity to accept things I cannot change, right? And also I used to say there's a prayer at the end of the step 3 that you do with your sponsor, but then you say that every day. And there's a prayer at the end of step 7, which is about asking God to come into your life and do with me as I will. Relieve me of the bondage of self that I may better do thy will. Okay, and blah, blah, blah. So they're all about asking God to come into your life, you know. So I was actually doing these 3 prayers every single day that I woke up. I would say these prayers. It's going to meetings, all the rest of it, right? So the whole thing about that is finding out about yourself and finding out how you tick. So I told you before we come on there, which I'll tell people about, because this is what it's about. So I was down at the beach where I go all the time, right, before coming back to get set up for this. And I was writing some stuff down, and then I listened to this thing. It's called Vlog. She's called Vlog, or her blog's called Vlog, VLOG. Anyway, she's an astrologer, but she does this amazing work. So she's like going, you know, so just we'll be asking, you know, Mother, Father, God, and breathe in, you know, send it into the heart, send it up to the crown, send it up to the sun, send it back to the head, the crown, send it back to the heart and back out, and then breathe, and then right over and over again, right? And then at the end of it, it wasn't long, it was only about 5 minutes, but at the end of it, I went, that was absolutely beautiful. For fuck's sake, like that. And my tap was this big beast. I don't know what it was, honestly. It was a big beast, a crawly thing, but flew right past my nose. And I just started laughing because, you know, 1 minute I'm going, that was beautiful. And then for sake, you know, but that's life, isn't it? And that's me, right? So that's
It's
me.
a human part of us, isn't it?
That's the human part. That's exactly right. So 1 minute you're doing this spiritual thing and you're all wonderful, you know, and then the next minute you're like, you know, so I think that's great. I think that's great because it's honest and it's
real.
You're being honest with yourself. In other words, and you can have all these lovely things as well, and all these things that help you, to, get onto. But mainly that's where it started for me, in this search for God. So in this search for God, I joined Brahma Kumaris, which is an Indian organization, right? But it's mega strict. So, and if you want to, you go for it, and if you don't, you don't. But I was really happy in it. Actually, probably for the first time in my life, I was happy with them.
And how long did you do that for, Janie?
I think only about maybe 2 or 3 years. Yeah.
No, okay.
But I was a Brahmin, so, and I went to India, but this is what I'm saying. So we're all dressed in Punjabi suits or white saris or whatever, right? But on the train outwards, Punjabi suits, and then I had actually damaged my leg, and I was in a plaster, and I had to get the plaster off to get on the plane. So the one in charge, she's shouting, "Where is she? Where's Jane? Where's Jane?" And then when she came along, I was hanging with my arm through the sort of, the thing you hang on to. I was hanging off the train. I had my crutches in one hand, and I had my camera like this with one hand, hanging off this train, photographing all the beggars and the holy men and all that were, at the stations and stuff like that. The train was going at the time as well. And she was just like, "Oh my God, you're going to leave the body before you even know it." So, as they call it, die. So anyway,
what did you say you got out of that experience? So what did you learn out of that experience? What did you get out of that? So what did they teach you that you felt that, or what did you feel, what was it?
Main thing is to like withdraw from the kind of world.
Really? Egoic, isn't it? And getting into the materialist and too much the physical.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, like one of them, I remember, you'll have to get rid of the 2 dogs that you've got. It's a good job she didn't tell me that.
Really?
Right. She did, but she was living with him. She was in with him, and they call it a babin. Right. She was in that. I wasn't. I was at home, but I used to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, sit and meditate for an hour, and then jump in the car, have a shower, get dressed, jump over to where they were at the time in Pollock Shields, go in there, meditate for an hour, and then go to work. That's what I used to do. And then at night time, I would go back over for whatever they had on, for people. Not every night, but some nights. But I was still married. So as he said,
quite a disciplined. Then you would, you had to be quite disciplined.
And to go to India, you had to be celibate and a vegetarian. So as he said to me, so actually what you're saying is you want me to be celibate. But anyway, what I didn't know by then was that he was already had been with women all through my marriage, and I didn't know that because I chose to ignore the signals. Yet again. So I didn't know that. But anyway, so he when I went to India, it was a bit of an experience, but I'll tell you right now, I couldn't do it now. So yeah, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do that traveling, the trains and all that stuff, and then that poverty, and I couldn't do it now. But then I could, and I did, and I'm glad that I did. So, but I also made a decision that I was actually going to make a go of my marriage when I came back. But when I came back, my uncle and another family member had been at him saying things like, what kind of mother would leave their children for 3 weeks to go to India? That was one of the nice ones that was said to him. So by the time I get back, he said, I'm going, I'm leaving. So, and I had, by then I was like cutting all the stuff back to try and make a go of this marriage, which wasn't goable anyway. But so I always say that the best thing my husband ever did for me was to leave me, actually, because I wouldn't have left him. So
Yeah.
I'm really glad that he did that, and I thank him for that. Because then I had to bring up my children on my own. I was still in Brahmakumaris at the time, but I had to like just stop that because I couldn't get people to look after them to go over there or anything. And then that just get less and less and less. And then I was, the 12th step is, improve your conscious contact with God as you understand God and help other people to recover, So I was helping other people, I was sponsoring people, I was taking them through a 12-step program and all that. And then one day this girl said to me, don't you tell me how to live my life. And my throat dried up and I couldn't speak. My tongue stuck to the top of my mouth. So I now know what happens, when people say I couldn't scream. Well, I've experienced that now with her.
Yeah.
And actually the same thing happened to her. Because she was, saying that was a huge thing for her. And so I decided from that day onwards that she was right and that I was telling people what to do. Because, that was, I'm not saying that was the way I was taught, but it kind of was. So I was just doing what I'd been shown. And so I decided from that day onwards that I wasn't going to do that anymore. And so I didn't, and I haven't. So over the years now, I had to look after my children and single mother, of course, and then all that hassle about try to, bring them up on my own. And that was very difficult. And I don't really want to speak about my children, right, for obvious reasons, but
Of course.
There was a lot of trouble brought to our door and we had to go through a lot of horrendous stuff, terrible stuff. So really, it's only in the last 3 years that I managed to sell that house. So to keep it, I had to cash in a mortgage and I had to cash in my pension, which was all I had, to get a mortgage on that house and then keep that house going. It's a big house. And eventually I turned it into a bed and breakfast because I couldn't sell it. So that was what I did. So I got a job in a psychiatric hospital after that, and 10 years ago actually. And it's the best thing that ever happened to me because I got to then do what my hobbies were. So I started painting, but you asked me in the beginning how I kind of got into this. So what happened was, how I get into spiritual stuff really was, or alternative stuff, or holistic stuff, if you want to put it that way. I was at a meeting and I was only 3 months sober, and it's really scary looking wee man, and I mean wee man. He wasn't even 4 feet, honestly, right? And he comes sort of sliding up to me like Penguin out of Batman, and he had stuff wrong. His eyes were kind of like going everywhere, and he said, I've had a book published. And I said, have you? I was just looking at myself, get away from me, wee man, because you're still nuts. You're only 3 months sober, and he says, no, I have. And I said, oh, that's nice. So anyway, he pulls this wee book out of his pocket, and it's a book of poetry, right? And it's about Glasgow. And he says, you can take it and read it if you want. And I said, okay. I was kind of like, get away from me, and
well, why is he coming to?
He was smelling, and he was, honestly, it was, anyway, I took the wee book home and I read it, and it was all about the Gorbals, where he lived or where he was brought up, right? And the kind of life they had had, you know, and it was horrendous. So anyway, I took it back to him the next week and I said, that was good. And he said, I belong to this wee writing group and why don't you come? And then I was like, oh my God, oh no. So anyway, I went with him, right? I took him to this writing group and that was where it started for me. So it was a writing group where you could write anything you wanted. And I was like, oh my God. So I started writing about, especially this incident that had happened before my husband left, and he was drunk and then he started talking sectarian language. So anyway, I asked him not to. I pushed him out the way and he got me over this couch. And then the thing that saved my life was that I managed to turn around and I saw my two children standing there watching, and they were really young, right? And I managed to get out of that situation. So that was another instant where he died again.
Janie, see that you're writing so like your journey with the writing, because if obviously this is your power, you know, when you're great at the work that you do with this kind of work, and you're an artist, we want to see your art. And I mean, we're 20 past already, but you know, so if you can share with the group, you know, the work that you do, you love doing, excuse me, and how, you know, that's evolved.
Yeah. So that was where it evolved. It evolved in that writing group, right? And they allowed me to start to write whatever way I wanted about things that I didn't think MD was allowed to talk about. And then I started training with them. So they started training me and they started training me to be a facilitator. So then I became an assistant facilitator, and then I was going and training with them all the time. So then I started helping with the women's group, and then I started running the women's group when the other two left. And then I asked them if I could do some encaustic art, which is actually beeswax that you put in a hot iron. I'm not getting into showing. And so I did that as an exercise, and then we wrote about what they had done. So that was where that kind of started. So that then became kind of art into writing, which is what my theme name is, art into writing. I've got I'm on Facebook, and I have one on Facebook, art into writing. So that was what happened, and then I just started training with them and doing as much as I possibly could. So I then saw the benefit for me of doing this writing, you know, because after I felt amazing that I had written it, or written a wee poem, or then I learned about different kinds of writing and stuff like that, you know. So so that's why now, so I work for a charity called Lapidus Scotland as well. So run workshops for them. So one that I'm doing just now is called Art into Writing. So they do a bit of art, I show them sometimes, or they do it themselves, or you know, we have a theme or whatever, and then they write about what they've made or what they've, you know, painted or whatever. And then the other one is just called I'm Missing. So but that's just with them at the moment. So I'm wanting to kind of branch out a wee bit now and start to do it on my own, because that's what I am. I'm a bibliotherapist. So we tend to kind of drop that word because it scares people a little bit. But really all it means is that you work with words or stories or poetry or whatever it is, reading a book or whatever, that you work with them in a therapeutic manner. And because I've worked in the psychiatric hospital for 10 years, I've got vast experience with working with people in the addictions. I work with people in the eating disorders, and I work with people in the general psychiatric. So I've got vast experience of 10 years with working with them in particular. But before that, I've been in Carstairs. I've worked with people in Carstairs. I've worked with people in secure units. I've worked with hundreds of community groups, numerous to name, you know, just loads of things like that. So what I've found now is that people are able to build their confidence. Because when I show them how to make, like, say, a pastel picture, for example, I've got one here. This is one that I framed, and it was just a wee, very basic one that I did with a group. I don't know if you can see it or know it.
Nice. Move it over a wee bit that way. That's
kind of shining a wee bit.
That's lovely, gorgeous. I'm
So,
just going to read out some comments in the group too.
right,
While we are keep showing, and I'll just read out some. So I know Adette saying, wow, she's listening to all you,
right.
and saying you're a great speaker. And she said she knows Barahama Kamaris. She's attended their workshops and retreats.
Yeah.
So she was just talking to her husband about it again. No, I mean,
so these are the kind of things, like, I'll show people how to make an angel, for example. This is in paint, but normally we would do this in pastel. But it's from the back, which means that people don't need to put a face on. So they don't need to worry about putting the face on. I just show them how to do the hair, how to do the wings, you know, in a skirt or whatever. Usually it's a standing one that I do with people. But these are the kind of things. So when I show them how to do that, how to do the pastel, but like, especially with the pastels, so they'll take them away, and I say to them, when you take these away now, you just get a frame and hang them up in a frame. You know, that's a basic one, but that is kind of what I show people, really. And then they put them in a frame, and then they hang them up in the living room, and they're like over the moon. So it gives people confidence to say, oh, well, if I can do that with her, I can maybe go to college. Or, you know, there's people like from the psychiatric hospital, people have like sent me cards and stuff saying, I don't know how to thank you for bringing art back into my life. I don't know how to thank you for doing that wee bit of writing we did. Because now I'm going to college, or now I'm doing a creative writing course. It's, you know.
Fantastic.
So,
and do you know, I think one of the things too as well, Janie, I know that even when I talk stress management, people forget how much hobbies and art and therapy is it's not always as valued as it should be.
yeah.
And it's such an important part of the healing and the creative process.
It is, it definitely is, because it's like, you know, I watch people coming in, especially to the hospital and stuff, and I watch people coming in and they're at their bottom, you know.
Yeah.
And they come into the group and you show them how to do something like that. And so because the groups are at the weekend, you know, it doesn't make it like so official, you know.
Yes.
Like the classes
more natural. It's a more a laid back environment. Yeah.
So I run the group so that, you know, how you doing? Come on in, sit down.
I know you've got that kind of attitude, which makes people feel more comfortable. It's not as if they're in a hospital or anything then, isn't it? Or a clinic setting. Yeah.
Look, you know, you can come in here, you can do what you want, you can make mistakes, it doesn't matter, you know, just come in and just have a wee go and see what happens. So, and then you see them blossoming, or they come back and say, oh my God, that's amazing, you know. So
I think we should also add, I mean, Janie, you've got a background in healing and therapies as well. So it's not just you've studied hypnotherapy, Reiki, what else have you studied? So you've got a background there. So it's, you know, you're bringing your knowledge and that with that as well.
I mean, I have done 3 separate Reiki. I'm a Reiki master, Karuna and Yusui and Holy Fire. So, I mean, all these things cost a lot of money, you know, when you're doing them all, but, you know, they give you certain things. So maybe they give you a wee bit of confidence as well, you know, just to venture, you know, into other things. And I mean, now, like in the last 3 years as well, you know, I've been watching an app called Gaia, and, you know, it's just absolutely blown my mind, because, you know, it's a wee bit like when I said I don't have any resentment. So it's a wee bit like me saying, oh, like, I know everything there is to know. Well, and then
Gaia opens you up on so many levels, doesn't it?
The other stuff, you know, and then you realise.
I used to have a subscription, I don't know, but I used to.
And then, you know, and like all the conspiracy stuff that's going on, well, it's not conspiracy, it's research that people have done, you know, for a long time. And you know, it's kind of like shocking a wee bit. It's like me being at the beach and 1 minute going, that was marvelous, Nick, for feck's sake, you know. It's the same thing really, because it's like, you know, all the conditioning that, you know, has been put upon us over all the years, and you know, so we just think that what we think is right, and like what we think we know is right, and you know, and then we start to wake up and then it's not right. So
oh yeah, and that's another story. And I think too as well, it's so one of the way that I look at it, it's like you're unlearning in many ways, isn't it? And it's like, even when you go down this spiritual path, and we even talk about 12 steps, you can go through certain things and they help you at that point, and you get a lot from it. But then you realize there's maybe another layer to something, and it's another layer, and maybe that wasn't. And what we're seeing now, one of the things I think we're seeing nowadays is people waking up a lot quicker than maybe it took us a lot of time and a lot of different things to happen. People are being forced to wake up at the moment, which can be harder on the system.
Absolutely,
you know,
it's harder. It is harder, but I think once you start to realize that, you know, it's all about conditioning, and the TV is like, I mean, you know, we had a TV in that housing estate that I was talking about. Nobody else had one up that close. Nobody, we were the only ones. And right away, you know, you were, you know, fascinated with this television and watching. So everything that's said on that television is then going into the subconscious mind. And it's like, you know, so, and then, you know, I was watching something this morning before, you
being
know,
programmed. You're watching programs and we're being programmed.
Well, that's the whole thing about it, you know. So that's another thing that would be easy, you know, for somebody like me to just ignore. But, you know, I haven't been ignoring it, and I've been, you know, I've been waking up to that. So it can be quite lonely too, being in there. But the thing is that lots of people are beginning to really waking up now and see what's been going on. And so we just have to accept that, you know, I've been told that more and more people are going to, you know, be coming towards me personally, that, you know, that are of the same mindset as me as well now. So it doesn't feel that you're so alone.
Of course, no, exactly.
Like that. So anyway, that's for another
Oh, Janie, it's been great. So is there anything that, any points of wisdom or anything that you would like to share with the group that you think that, you know, something that they can take home that has been a really important part of your journey, or a big lesson in your journey?
Yeah, I think like the ego is like, you know, absolutely massive in their lives, because that's, you know, that's just the way it is. So I think when you can start to try and look at yourself, you know, like the example I gave you of being on the beach and saying, oh, that's lovely, and then, oh, for feck's sake. So, you know, it just realizing that and going, well, that's real, that's okay, because it's real.
It's being compassionate, isn't it, about towards yourself? Yeah.
Being compassionate towards yourself. And let me tell you, I found a wee picture of myself when I was 8 years old, when, you know, I was describing what happened to me. And, you know, when I saw it, I nearly died, because I was just a wee thing in this picture, just a wee thing. And for some reason, I imagined myself being quite tall, kind of almost like a 13-year-old when I was 8, you know. And then when I saw this wee picture of me, I started to give myself more compassion. So now I do give myself a lot more compassion, and it's about being kind to other people, but not giving your whole life over to other people. You have to be first, but you do it in a compassionate way. So you give yourself compassion and open up your heart to others, but don't fully open up everything and make yourself a doormat, because that's not what it's about either. So it's really about getting that balance, I think, to be honest, Eileen. It's about getting a balance in your life, and being more accepting of yourself as well, and how it is for you now. And even if other people don't like that, well, you know what, that's the way I want to live my life. It's like my house, you know, if I was to swirl this round and show you, it's all covered with Indian blankets that I got at a car boot sale of this woman. Indian blankets on a chaise lounge, elephant covers, you know, and there's these mustard colors. These are all the colors that I like, with green, you know, cushions, and all my crystals are there. I don't really do anything with them. They just sit there and gather dust, to be honest, but they're there and I like them.
Yeah.
So they're there, you know, and I've got a big picture on the wall here that I made with the stones from the beach. So it's covered with the stones on the beach and a stick and, you know, different mixed medium. And I'm actually going to put that into an exhibition. I belong to an art group here now. And so that's another thing. When I went to join that art group, I was so frightened. I was so frightened because I knew they were all going to be better than me, and that I was going to be useless and hopeless because I was put out the art class when I was 13 for just not being good enough, you know. And that was a big test for me. And I just went and sat and just did what I could. And then she came over and she was acting like a school teacher, because she is a school teacher. And yeah, I ended up just saying to her, you know, I can't actually take that, so you need to go a wee bit easy on me. So that's what it's about. It's about sticking up for yourself, saying what you need, and being compassionate towards other people, and also to help another person. It just might be that you're in the queue and you see a wee woman struggling, wondering whether she's got a packet of tea or a packet of sugar. Just pay for it at the thing. Just pay for it. So get her that sugar. Right. So all these wee things are just stop and say hello. Just stop and say hello to somebody, you know. That's all.
And you know, I think that sometimes people think part of their purpose always has to be this big thing, and we're focusing on this big thing and the money thing and the thing, and it's not. It's about the simple things every day, and it's showing up. And what I think you've highlighted in this interview, the authenticity and the truth, Janie, and thank you for the courage to say that, because this is a big part of, you know, and it's so important hearing people's story and being truthful about our story. So where can, if anyone would like to get in contact and, you know, maybe interested in learning more about what you do, where can they contact you?
I have got a website which is actually called Cruising Art. So that's my website. You can get me on there. You can get me on Facebook as Janie Walker, Janie. I do have a Facebook, Art into Writing, if you can remember that. So anyway,
I'll put things underneath the video once it goes up on YouTube, Janie, and we can also get you to add any details in the group on this video.
Okay, that's all. Thank you very much, Eileen.
No problem. Just want to see if there's anything else. Lindsay, there's Lindsay says, thanks so much for sharing, Janie. Bibliographer sounds awesome, brilliant work you're doing. I love that, Angel. There you go. So there might be other comments because sometimes I don't always see them. So thank you everybody who well, you know, was able to come on the live, and thank you, Janie. It was a pleasure. So thank you everyone. Bye for now.
Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.